Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the El Cajon City Council meeting. We appreciate you coming and being with us through Skype and Zoom and adjusting to this strange time in human history, but we're glad that you're here and being part of government as we continue to push forward. We will continue to have members of the City Council and staff attend the meeting telephonically while the governor's executive order continues to be in effect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to remind our citizens that they can submit questions for items on today's agenda as we did in previous meeting. Public comments may also be submitted at this time, and they will be read at the appropriate time during this meeting. Comments can be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website under Agendas and Minutes. Go to the video streaming and you'll see a button to submit your comments. And I would ask you to go ahead and start submitting comments now if possible, because there is a little bit of a delay, and of course there's a bit of a technology or learning curve here, so the sooner that we have your comments and questions, the better. The meeting is now called to order, and I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Council members, when I call your name, if you can please state that you are present. Mayor Wells?
I'm here.
Council Member Goebel?
I'm present.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
I'm here.
Council Member Kendrick? Council Member Kendrick, can you hear us?
Am I off the...
Council Member McClellan, can you hear us?
I'm here.
Thank you.
I got your text, and I think I just got disconnected. No problem.
Okay.
Where's the Zoom app?
Just had the same thing happen to him, so. All right, we're good.
We're good. All right. I'm sorry. Where are we at with this?
Council Member Kendrick?
I think he's having technical problems. Let's move on to the next.
Thank you.
What about the other council members? Already done. Okay. See, I told you that we would probably have technical problems. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, remain standing for a brief moment of silence afterwards. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the March 24th, 2020 meeting and the agenda of the April 14th, 2020 meeting in accordance with state law, council, and housing authority policy. There are no presentations on today's agenda. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
Mr. Mayor, we have no changes to the agenda.
Council members, do you have any agenda changes that you'd like to make? So I'm not able to hear them from here.
Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming since no one weighed in that they wanted changes, that there are no changes.
Okay. Council members, please signal us if that's not true.
I have no changes.
No
Thanks,
changes.
Steve. Okay. I'm going to make a motion then to approve the, actually we don't need to do that. So that brings us to consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent items?
No.
All right. See shaking your heads and no. Staff?
No, sir.
I'd like to make a motion then to approve the consent items. Oh, let me stop. Before I do that, though, Angela, do we have any comments under consent items?
We have no comments, sir.
All right, then I'll make a motion to approve the consent items. Is somebody willing to second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Council members, please vote. And I vote aye.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Kendrick? Councilmember Goebel?
Global votes aye.
Councilmember McClellan?
Bob?
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, your vote, please.
Aye.
And Councilmember Kendrick?
Yeah. So we're having technical problems with Councilmember Kendrick. We're going to continue on, though.
So that motion carries by a 4-0 vote with Councilmember Kendrick absent for this vote.
Can you ask Gary what his vote is?
Gary Kendrick voting yes.
Thanks, Gary.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right. We will be flexible. We will do what has to be done to make it happen. All right. We're now at public hearings. Actually, public comment. I would like once again to remind the public to submit their comments via the city's website. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the Elkhorn Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments related to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions, and an item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, did you receive any comments from the public?
At this time, I have one comment, sir, and it's for Mr. Humbert Cabrera. And his comment is that he would like to thank the city, its city council, and the people working behind the scenes for all the work during this important time. He said, we appreciate how difficult the situation is. And he has a couple questions, so I'll read them both. We would like to know if there's a possibility of doing full submissions of plans and receiving red light comments through products such as Bluebeam. In addition, we understand that most entities are working hard to defer mortgage payments, credit cards during this very difficult time for families. We would like to know if code enforcement officers are still going out and sending bills during this time. And he goes on to say, we are grateful for the overtime and the hard work that the city building division is doing. We are wondering about a grace period during this time for businesses. We are asking if a calming for all blanket city code enforcement is being considered.
Oh, Commissioner Cabrera, thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate all your hard work and weighing in on this. I'm going to pass this off to our city manager and let him answer some of these questions.
Certainly. So I know I'm not sure about the program that Mr. Cabrera mentioned, but we are accepting full plans through our PACO program, which was announced a few council meetings ago. There was another question about leniency on businesses. I'm not quite sure what that entails, but we are going to address some proposals that we have for the business community during the COVID crisis. And then lastly, he asked about code enforcement. From an administrative perspective, we actually are receiving more code enforcement complaints right now during this folks being asked to stay at home than we've ever received before. I worry that we would be doing our public a disservice unless the council wanted to give direction, some policy direction to staff about that. We are being lenient on fines. I know that there is a fine of a client that he represents that has been going on for quite a while, and so that fine is proceeding, but we are being careful about not overburdening our residents with bills or additional fines at this time.
Thanks, Graham. I appreciate that.
I have no
I
further
have a
comments,
public
sir.
comment to make. Can you hear me?
Is that Bob?
Okay, I have a public comment to make. I'm addressing this item regarding the sewer fees that was on our agenda last month. Item discussed putting sewer fees on the property tax bill. The property tax bill would be sent out one time per year to be paid in 2 payments. Currently, the sewer bills are billed 6 times a year at a higher cost of $500,000 per year in billing fees to the taxpayers of El Cajon. Other cities include the sewer fees on their property tax bill. Putting the sewer fees on the property tax bill will save the citizens of El Cajon $500,000 or more each year. 13 citizens spoke on this item last month. 3 of our 5 council members voted to let the billing stand 6 times a year. Don't you feel that 999,887 citizens might feel that they would like to be saved that $500,000 per year in sewer billing fees? Our city staff did a detailed study on paying this bill. The current way it is being billed is wasteful. When I ran this for the city council, I pledged to do what is right for the citizens of El Cajon. Courage is what we as a council need to have to serve citizens. I remember when El Cajon Transitional Living Center vote came upon this city council, and it was a 3-2 vote for El Cajon Transitional Living Center. 3 of us had the courage, in spite of the numerous business people speaking against it. And then the business people sued the city. This council had the courage to fight the suit instead of backing down. A few years ago, Shadow Mountain Memorial Church asked for the general plan change amendment. Numerous people spoke against it, and it was a 3-2 vote in favor. 3 of us had the courage to support the change for this church. The 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence had the courage to sign the declaration that took courage. George Washington had the courage to lead a very inexperienced militia to fight for independence against the best military in the world. Harry Truman had the courage to drop the A-bomb to stop the war with Japan. Ronald Reagan had the courage to tell the Soviets to tear down this wall. We as a council need to have the courage to put the sewer fee vote back on the next agenda so we can save the taxpayers of El Cajon $500,000 or more per year, and possibly more. Thank you. So I would like to put it on the agenda for the next meeting and have it brought up again and have us do what I feel is right.
Thanks, Bob. Graham, do you want to comment on this?
Certainly. To answer Mr. McClellan's request, staff is preparing to bring back a series of contracts to contract out the sewer billing soon. I don't know if it's the next meeting or the meeting after. Part of that will include some proposed fee rates changes. And so at that point, one of the alternatives could always be to reconsider the sewer billing. But I think that would probably be the appropriate time to do it, unless the council directs me otherwise to bring it back as a solo item.
Bob, would you be comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that next month, next meeting.
Let's do it that way.
Certainly. I think I just got a text from our Public Works Director. We'll be bringing that back the first meeting of May as a comprehensive package, if that's okay.
Sure. Bob, you comfortable with that?
Yes.
All right. Sounds great. Council members, anybody else want to comment on that? Don't see anybody. Okay. Thanks. Let's move on to our next comment then.
No more comments, sir.
All right. Thank you. Brings us to written communications, and there are none. We're now at public hearings. Item 10 is for the adoption of the annual adjustment to the SANDAG, that's the San Diego Association of Governments, Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program. And I will ask staff to tell us about this program.
Mr. Mayor, while we get this set up, Mario Sanchez, our city traffic engineer, will be giving the presentation, but we're looping him in right now.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I'm Mario Sanchez, City Traffic Engineer. This item is SANDAG's annual adjustment to the RTCIP fee. It's a development impact fee. The RTCIP fee is collected for each new housing unit constructed in the city. This fee excludes low and moderate income and senior housing. Every year, SANDAG is required to adjust the minimum fee July 1st, and it's based on the latest construction cost index. And that index will be increased, the fee will be increased by 2% this year, beginning July 1st. And the proposed fee amount is $2,583.82 for each new single-family dwelling unit. The increase in the fee is $50.67. These fees are to be used to fund street improvement projects on our regional arterials. We leverage this fee to pave numerous streets such as Navajo, Magnolia, and other streets in the city. And that pretty much concludes my item. If I can feel if you have any questions.
Is that it?
That's correct.
Sorry, I had trouble hearing that. Council, do you have any questions of Mr. Sanchez? Doesn't look like it. Okay. The public hearing is now open. Angela, did we receive any comments for this item?
No comments, sir.
I'd like to make a motion then to close the public hearing. Would somebody second?
Second.
Is that a second?
Yeah. Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
Aye.
Councilmember Kendrick.
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel.
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Super. All right. All right. Any further discussion, or would someone like to proceed with a motion?
I've got a point I'd like to add.
Yes, please, Steve. Go ahead.
Okay, just as an aside, I voted on this when I was at the SANDAG meeting. I think it might have been in January, and the construction cost index went up 0.2% for the prior period, the measurement period. So we did have a chance to forego an increase, but the ordinance says if you do an increase, it must be 2%. So we must accept this to be able to be eligible for transfer. I said to the group at the time, this is our chance to make a statement to the county that since the construction costs went up only 0.2%, we could hold the increase for a year and tell the county that we are truly interested in more affordable housing. But that didn't pass, unfortunately, so every unit has a $50 increase for the coming year.
Steve, how did you vote on the SANDAG meeting on this?
The vote was 17-1, and I was the only no vote.
Thank you, Steve. So, how do you suggest we proceed tonight? Since you were the one at Sanday, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think we have to approve a fee increase. Otherwise, we're not going to be eligible to receive Transnet funds.
Yeah, I agree.
I made my point at the time, but majority wins in those situations. So I go with the vote of the group.
Yeah, I think you made the right call. Any other council members want to weigh in on this? All right, Steve, would you go ahead and make a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we improve the RTCIP fee for the coming.
Second.
All right, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
We received it. Councilmember McClellan, second. Mayor, may I have your vote, please?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor, your vote, please?
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We have a few administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 11 is for the 2019-2020 mid-year report, and I would like to ask staff to tell us about this.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, our finance director, Clay Shane, will be giving us the presentation tonight or this afternoon.
Hi, Clay. Welcome, and thanks for coming and talking to us.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. There we are. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. Presented today is our mid-year report and 5-year business plan and associated actions. For today's presentation, we're going to pretty much focus on 3 primary points: the economic outlook, CalPERS, and of course some closing thoughts in regards to the 2021 annual budget. This is an interesting report this year. As we were getting ready to finalize it and publish, the current public health crisis was erupting, and we found ourselves in a difficult position trying to keep up with the news. We finally got to a point where we had to call it and publish something, and that's where we are today. What you see as part of this report is the work that was conducted leading up through February and updates through that time. However, I'm not sure at this point in this rapidly changing world, it's not much more than a good check-in to see where we thought we were at that point in time. The good news is, at that point, we were generally looking pretty good, on track and as expected. We had minor variations, a little bit of a softening in sales tax, a couple other things a little bit better, a little bit worse, but for the most part, we were coming in very, very close to what was anticipated in the annual budget. As we have watched events occur, it's pretty easy to draw a conclusion that we will indeed be impacted by the current crisis. But there's a lot of confusing information out there, and a lot of our primary data sources are slow to come in. Like I said, we're certainly to be impacted by this event. However, the extent is not known at this time. To set the stage on what may be, I wanted to take a little bit of time and discuss and remind us of some of the events that occurred along with the Great Recession. Several of you on the city council were at the helm during these events, and I'm sure remember it well. This was a very trying time for this city and most cities, frankly. This graph, and I'm going to leave it on the screen for quite some time, shows the impact to City of El Cajon revenues during that period. To get us started, I wanted to focus primarily on the blue line, which represents the actual general fund revenues during that period. Events started to unravel for the Great Recession during the course of FY07 and into FY08, and we had 3 consecutive years of fairly pronounced revenue downturns. In 3 consecutive years, general fund revenues declined close to 9%, 6%, and 11%. But those were from each year from the preceding year. Cumulatively, by the time we hit FY10, we were down almost 24% from our revenues in FY7. This was a fairly dramatic event. During that period, we passed Proposition J, which was a very critical action by the citizens of El Cajon. It brought in an additional sales tax revenue that helped support city services, keep the city operating at that time. And those revenues started to come in FY10, which is about the same time the recovery started to pick up. And that's one of the reasons you see such a dramatic increase at that point. To further exacerbate the situation, the state was not starting that event in the best of shape, and the state took a number of actions that put a lot of pressure on cities as well. One of them, for example, you've heard me speak about it on multiple occasions, it was the state-mandated revenue swap action referred to as the triple flip. Oh, there was a number of impacts. What's interesting here is if you look, it took until FY12.
Excuse me, really quickly. We're not seeing the graph on our on my screen remotely.
There we go.
We can see it now. Thank you.
Okay. What's important to note at this stage is if you look at FY12, FY13, we were just barely at that point getting back to the point we were in FY7. So it took almost 6 years before general fund revenues came back to where they were at the start of the event. But an important thing to note here is that is in absolute dollars and not adjusted for inflation. Once you take the impacts of inflation into account, that took an additional 2 or 3 years to rebound. This was a very massive event. The orange line is a hypothetical general fund revenue. That is picking up in FY7, the last quote-unquote normal year before the Great Recession, and we increased at a very modest 2.5% each year. I don't think if I told the city manager revenues were increasing 2.5%, he would be very impressed, but we would have been very happy with that at the time. Where that's relevant is between that hypothetical orange line of where we should have been, the area underneath that line and between that and the blue line is approximately a $52 million shortfall for the general fund spread out over those 6 years. This was a very difficult period, and I'm sure it doesn't take a whole lot of explaining on why that is. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Also during that time, we had, I don't want to say unprecedented, there were other points in the country's history where unemployment was this bad and worse, but in modern times, this is a fairly significant component of the Great Recession was the unemployment rate at the time. It dropped to a low in FY10 of almost 12%. And I share this graph because while a lot of our revenue information is very slow to come in and takes some time, significant time lags, unemployment information is usually much quicker to be published. And I bring that up because there are very few tells of the condition of revenue, a higher rate of correlation than unemployment rates on sales tax. They track very closely, and unemployment rate is a very strong predictor of sales tax, as you can see in this graph. As part of the report associated, we had a series of 5-year projections included. This was our starting point. This was our normal scenario. This is where we thought we were in February. We were projecting deficits leading out in each of the next 5 years. But I think it's important to talk about, before we get too into that, what this represents. Projections are kind of like a top. You set it spinning, and where it goes, it goes. And that's kind of the way these projections work. We take the current year activity and play it forward for 5 years. We spin that top without managing or interacting at all with how those numbers play out. And what this is used for is to highlight and requires us to take action to prevent these deficits from occurring. So this is a very normal pattern to see it. It is just simply a call to action, but it does demonstrate we do have some work to do in a normal environment. When we graph that out, this is that shortfall in a graphical sense, and you can see building deficits through the next 5 years. As I had said previously, a lot of information was starting to emerge as we were starting to publish, and we're still at a point where the ultimate impact is unknown. We included as an addendum to the report a couple of hypothetical scenarios that assumed a little bit of an impact, a 2% impact to general fund revenues in the current year, FY20, and two different scenarios with an additional 2% decline next year or a 5% decline. And those are demonstrated by the orange and gray lines. These hypothetical impacts were included to demonstrate how severe relatively minor downturns in revenue can be over a prolonged period. And I've included those just to kind of bring to your attention that the longer this goes, the more severe it is, the bigger the impact is over a longer period of time. Now, I don't bring this stuff as an alarmist, but more just trying to show some things about how the situation may impact the general fund so that we're prepared to deal with these things when it comes time to set the general fund budget for next year. Speaking to the potential impacts for the COVID-19 event, the most concerning for me, at least from a financial standpoint, is the reduction and delays in sales tax revenue. As the economy slows down, people just are not as active in the economy as they were before. Business is impacted. Overall, sales tax revenue, we generally expect it to be on the decline for some period of time. To further add fuel to the fire, at the beginning of April, the governor granted a certain amount of deferment for small businesses that in some cases can defer their sales tax payments for up to a year. The ultimate impacts are yet to be decided. Our sales tax consultants are working very hard on this right now, and we expect to have some updates for you by the next time we're up to see you next month. One of the impacts on that that's maybe troublesome is not necessarily just the delay in getting the revenue, but if there's a corresponding delay in reporting, we might not know how bad the impact is for some time. Additionally, we expect to have some impact on TOT revenue. Our hotel motel residents are largely a little more permanent than some of our neighbors. We rely a lot less on tourism than others. I think it's pretty safe to assume there will be some impact. TOT is not a gigantic contributor to general fund revenues. However, I would expect an impact to be felt. Additionally, throughout the general fund, other revenues are likely to be impacted. Those driven by development will likely see an impact as well, from permits to fines to just other miscellaneous revenues. And then, of course, it's difficult for me to be up here without discussing CalPERS. We additionally expect, as a result of this event, to see ultimately increased CalPERS contributions. So as of our most recent actuarial valuation, which was as of June 30th, 2018, and the basis of the discussion in the report, our unfunded actuarial liability was $204.1 million. This balance is the difference between our plan liabilities, which represents what we owe current and former employees. That liability is approximately $560 million. And the plan assets that we have set aside to pay for those benefits of approximately $360 million. The difference between the two is the unfunded liability of $204 million. The ratio of assets to liabilities is also referred to as the funded ratio. Between the two plans, the funded ratio is 63.8% as of the most recent valuation. Very much the same song I sing every time I'm on the subject. CalPERS contributions as a percentage of employee pay continues to increase. In the final year of these projections, miscellaneous contributions will amount to approximately 52% for every dollar of pay, whereas our safety plans will be approximately 85.5%. That's quite an increase, and it's really stands out when you look at where the first year reported in the 5-year, which was FY16. We started at a miscellaneous rate of approximately 33.8% and safety at 47.5%. So we've seen these rates dramatically increase just over that 8-year, 9-year period. Second verse of this song is the total projected contributions for PERS. Now keep in mind, this is as of June 30th, 2018, but on this information, projections of contributions increase from approximately $21 million next year up to almost $25 million in total, and that is the combination of the unfunded liability amortization as well as the normal cost. How COVID-19 impacts PERS is not going to be a pleasant message. This is one of the big impacts that it frankly scares me quite a bit. We saw a significant impact on the UAL during the Great Recession. We saw our unfunded liability increase dramatically, and we expect it to a very similar result this event. Last week, we had a presentation from CalPERS, and they were discussing their outlook for the remainder of FY20. While they had a fairly respectable first 9 months of the year, they have fallen off the cliff for the last quarter, and they were throwing out an annual performance of negative 4% on investment returns, and advised their members to plug into their modeling tools 2 different scenarios, a 0% return and a negative 5% return for the year. When we rolled those 2 numbers into our modeling, the 0% event was approximately a $28 million increase to our unfunded liability, and amortized over 20 years, that's about an additional $2.5 million in annual payments. And a negative 5% scenario would increase the liability somewhere in the neighborhood of $48 million and increase annual contributions by approximately $4.5 million. Included in this report is a handful of proposed budgeted adjustments. Most of these are housekeeping in nature, so I'll go through them pretty quickly. We have a couple of personnel adjustments, the first of which is exchanging 2 mechanic positions for a single lead mechanic position. This is generated by a decrease in the overall volume of the work. However, the complexity of the work continues to increase. The city feels that a lead mechanic better fits the demands of the job. Similarly, we have few positions in the information technology department. We've done a little bit of housekeeping and changing of job duties and responsibilities. This classification change reflects those. None of these changes have associated appropriation adjustments with them. This is simply a job classification cleanup. There is a single capital outlay authorization. Our gas tax and wastewater enterprise fund share a data logger. This piece of equipment is critical for conducting surveying operations. The price tag is approximately $10,000. Both funding sources have sufficient appropriations to cover the purchase, but we do need to have the direction of the City Council to proceed with its acquisition. Appropriation adjustments have 4 adjustments, the first of which is an appropriation from general fund reserves. This is an anticipatory move. With the Magnolia being shuttered during this public health crisis, we're anticipating the fund needing some help. We frankly don't think it will probably be the full $750,000 that is proposed in this report. However, we want to be prepared should we need to do that. The second is basically an adjustment for a timing change. During the property at 100 Fletcher, the former police station, there was a number of public improvements that the developer was going to complete on our behalf. We anticipated the majority of that occurring in FY19. However, some of it dragged into FY20. Therefore, we are simply shifting what the appropriations we thought we would expend in FY19 forward to the current year. It does not represent an increase in the overall expenditure. It's still the same between the 2 years. This simply moves it into the current year. Thirdly, the report proposes approximately $300,000 to establish and build out the Public Safety Center for including the fire administrative offices. We do have some residual Proposition O funds, somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 that we would like to use for this purpose, with the remainder of that funding coming from a existing project, the Safety Efficiency Improvement Project. And lastly, in anticipation of the world returning to normal and a very festive 4th of July, the Kennedy Park playground surface was in fairly bad shape, and the report proposes $115,000 in appropriations to replace the playground. And lastly, a few closing thoughts in regards to looking forward to the FY21 annual budget. There's a lot going on, and everyone tends to be very proactive in wanting to do what they can during an event like this. From a financial standpoint, though, I think we've worked very hard to build reserves, to put ourselves in a position to make methodical and well-informed decisions. That was a question that Mr. Mayor, you posed to me several years ago in regards to reserve balances and what they were for and what's enough. And my answer at that time is still the same response I have now, is those funds are there so we can slow down events like this and we can make well-informed decisions. So we should be preventing panic and taking drastic, uninformed, and speculative action at this time. We've worked very hard to put ourselves in a financial position that we have a safety net. And I think going into FY20, that will be our focus, is gathering the information we have and making the best decisions we can at that time. That concludes my presentation and my editorial. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Kind of sobering, but thank you. Council members, I'll leave it to you first. Do you have any questions, comments?
I have a question. We recently had a consultant come by and give us some guidelines on our pension obligation and come up with a game plan. And then this, public health crisis occurred. Are we going to have our consultant change our projections due to this, or are we already adapting? Are we already adapting and changing our projections from the previous report we had maybe a month ago or 2 months ago?
I think it certainly will change the dialogue moving forward. We could not have a discussion on the subject without being aware of the likely impact on the CalPERS liability. We do have the following item, which is on that very subject, and the gentleman that joined us back in February, his name is Julio Morales. He is on the phone with us for the next item. I don't know if he'll have any comments on the subject, but we can direct them to him at that time as well. But generally speaking, I think once we get to that point of taking action to address the pension, I think we have to consider all information we have.
Thank you.
More questions for Clay?
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
So we're being asked to approve 1.4 million in transfers from reserves to, it looks like 5 different areas. Is that right?
I would not categorize a hit for 1.4 million from reserves. There are several funding sources for those appropriation increases. I believe the only action taken that is a new appropriation from general fund reserves is the Magnolia, the $750,000 to support Magnolia operations. And should that not be expended by year end, it would revert back to general fund reserves.
So on a related question, are we on the hook for the management contract for Live Nation with Magnolia, or is a force majeure possible in that area?
We believe right now we are on the hook. They are still doing work for us. I mean, they're still working on booking acts out into the future, so doing marketing. But we do believe that we have contractual responsibility at this point. However, the majority of our costs have gone down, so although we're also bringing in no additional revenue.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand Graham. It's kind of coming through the house. Did he say we're on the hook for the contract?
We believe that we are responsible for the management fees at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Clay, just one question. You mentioned that we may see an increase in our CalPERS obligations from maybe $2 million a year to upwards of 10. Did I get the right number on that?
The scenarios that we ran, and this obviously is our work, which is not straight from the horse's mouth. The actual impact, the official impact, won't be seen until CalPERS releases our June 30th, 2020 valuation. But the work we've done under the 2 scenarios they recommended could see, as a result of investment declines in the current year, of at the 0% earnings scenario, an increase of $28 million to the unfunded liability, which brings with it approximately a $2.5 million a year increase, or a negative 5% scenario that would increase our unfunded liability by somewhere in the neighborhood of $48 million in total, or about $4.5 million a year.
So what concerns me is that I remember speaking about this a couple months ago where we're looking at a $5 million increase to PERS next year, and then that's going to double. every year so we're looking at $5 million plus, and then that year after that $10 million, and the year after that $15 million. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yes.
And then adding maybe another $2 to $5 million to that. So it's not one or the other. We're gonna have to do both.
No, there's two different scenarios. Well, let me go back to the slide here. We will see, given the two scenarios that they recommended, we will see an increase in each of those 5 years of either $2.5 million in addition to each of those amounts, or $4.5 million a year for each of those amounts. But that'll be in each of those years.
Okay. Well, thanks for a comprehensive report. We may call you back if there's more questions. The public hearing is now open. Angela, do we have any comments for this item? Yeah. Any comments for this item?
No comments were received, sir.
All right. Looks like we don't need to close the public hearing. So, council members, did you have any more discussion? Sobering information,
Yes.
but we'll get through it.
do. Graham, you'll have to really sharpen your pencil to make this work, because it's going to be a real tight time in the future, considering the pension obligation that we're going to be increased considerably. And not only that, but the investment return is dropped to practically minus, as he said. And so hopefully coming out of this dip, we'll have a brighter picture on the investment return, but we're going to have to weather the time that they had their negative return too. So you better really sharpen your pencil good, because you're going to have maybe to have some layoffs.
All I can say, Bob, is thank God we saved some money in the general fund for this kind of a rainy day. So, anybody else? Somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah. Oh, real quick, just so the public knows this, I think the staff and the city council, including you, including the mayor, deserves to be commended. I mean, everyone has done a great job getting a surplus, this rainy day fund. You guys have seen around the corner of a potential downturn, and now, as Clay said earlier, we don't need to take any drastic measures because our previous councils planned for this. So I just want to thank the council and the staff for preparing the city financially for this, so we don't have to cut city services drastically. Police, fire, sewer can all run. We can still do improvements as scheduled. So I think that needs to be said.
Any other comments before I'm going to ask our city attorney to weigh in?
Thank you, Mayor. We did receive a comment a little while ago on a number of items. Apparently, it said it was for one of the consent items, but it turns out when reviewing it that this comment also has questions on this item. If you'd like, I'll try to read what those comments are.
Yeah, please.
I think the first one is on page 1. It has to do with the Public Safety Facilities Projects Fund. The question is, why are we paying $300,000 for more office space? Is it something they're going to be using? Or could it not be put in empty spaces at the police station? It says $300,000 is needed for offices. Are they building new offices? If not, there must be some space in the police station that can be converted to what is needed at lower cost. That's her first his or her first comment.
Yeah, I'll give this to our city manager.
So this cost is actually related to when we built the police station. It's actually a public safety station. So it was anticipated that a portion of the office space would be used for fire staff. So we have portions of the third floor that are currently vacant of the building. The goal would be to actually move our administrative staff from the fire department that's at Station 6 over into that building. So this would pay for the renovations of that space or the building out of that space. It's currently just a shell. It would also allow us to then rent the space where they would be vacating to Heartland Communications, which they need more space. So actually this would generate revenue long term. And as you recall, this public safety money can only be used for public safety facilities, no other uses.
That's because of Proposition O, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question has to do with the capital improvement program fund on page of the agenda page. I'm not sure exactly what page it is on the report, but 177. And the comment is on page 175, I guess mine's wrong. The city capital improvement program fund, the Wells Park improvement has only $86 and on it so far, and no money shown for future improvements, but on page 177 it shows we have over $1 million budgeted for parks and recs improvements. Why would no funds be designated for this project?
Graham, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't know if I understand the question.
Yeah, I have trouble understanding the question.
I do know that we have money allocated, CDBG money allocated specifically for capital improvements at Wells Park. Whether maybe we've only spent a certain amount of money and we still have money allocated toward that, that's probably the likely case. But unless I actually am looking at that document, it'd be hard for me to divine the question.
Okay. For whoever sent that question in, if you'd like to reword the question and ask it in a way that we can understand it, that would be time to go ahead and send that in.
And besides other comments, I won't go into. There was a question on page, it says 169. I'm not sure whether my page numbering is correct. It looks like we were asking for $750,000 for the Magnolia. How can that be when we have over $2 million or $2 million in our Friends FM 3471, and on page 178 we have $651,434. Why are we asking for more?
Again, Grant, I
certainly I don't know what some of those other numbers relate to, but we have several different funds paying for different expenses at the Magnolia. So there's some capital money that went in to help pay for just capital improvements, all the infrastructure changes that occurred there. And then we have money allocated specifically for the management agreement with Live Nation. And then we have money that what we're asking for as part of this agenda item is to put some money in there just in case we have some overruns. We knew that we wouldn't break even the first year, so this is just in case we need those extra monies.
Thanks, Graham. Appreciate that.
And one question came up for a consent item that was already approved, having to do with the general plan annual report. You've already approved that. Do you wish me to read that one or reopen that, or would you rather move on?
I think we should go ahead and ask the question and try to answer the question.
Okay. Well, if you'd like, if you would reopen this to this item, it's item number 7. We'll need a motion approval by the council.
Okay, what's the question?
Well, that's a good one. Let's see. It says on page 80, it shows that our first-time homeowners program, 11 people, but on page 147, it states it only helped 5. Is it? ? So I think the question is, which one is it? 5 people or 11? Now, Mr. Shute had been presented this question at least, and I think his response was that the 5 were the Habitat for Humanity program, the 11 were other projects.
Is that correct, Graham?
Yeah, it's important to note that these 2 different pages are 2 separate reports. One report is a question on how many participated in our first home buyer program, which is 11. The second report, which has a reference to the number 5, is how many new affordable housing units were built, and that's the Habitat for Humanity project, which was also part of that first-time homebuyer program. So it's actually 2 different reports looking at 2 different numbers differently.
All right, Council, you need a new vote on this then?
It'd be actually, you've got the answer to the question. The public has the answer to the question. Unless somebody wants to change their vote based on that input, I would say let's proceed and move on.
Council, I'd like to just proceed, but if somebody wants to change their vote, please let me know at this time. I'm seeing nothing but shaking heads. Okay. Councilor, any more? Thank you. All right. So let's get back to where we were. Angela, there were no more questions on this particular item?
No more comments, sir.
All right, staff, so you've heard from our expert, you've heard from the public, and it's going to be a long, hard road, but us, like every other city, will find a way to survive. Anybody want to make comments, or somebody like to make a motion?
Move to receive and accept the fiscal year 2019-20 mid-year report and 5-year business plan update.
Okay.
Second.
All right, here a motion and a second. My vote is yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
We have to have 3 more motions?
Move to authorize the proposed person. Can I do it all at once? Is that okay?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Councilmember Ortiz, if you're going to make a motion, go ahead and read all of the recommended 2, 3, and 4, I think it is.
Great. Authorizes the proposed personnel changes in the detailed report, increase or modify fiscal year 2019 appropriations, and authorize related interfund transfers in the net amount of $1,415,000 for additional needs as detailed in this report, and authorize the proposed capital expenditures detailed in this report.
Second.
All right, moved and second. Please vote. And
Mayor, your vote?
I vote yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
I vote yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
I vote yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
I vote yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Okay. Item 12 is regarding the pension obligation bonds validation process. I'll ask staff to tell us about this.
Good. All right. Good afternoon again. Today's action is a kickoff of the validation process for the proposed pension obligation bonds. To bring us up to date, on January 14th of this year, the City Council approved a contract with Urban Futures to act as a pension advisory to our current situation. We wanted to get an external independent voice to help guide us through potential remedies to our problems. We did so, and on February 25th, we conducted a pension workshop. A gentleman from Urban Futures, or UFI, by the name of Julio Morales, was here with us today. He joins us on the phone should we have any questions. At that date, we asked the City Council for direction. City Council directed us to take 4 actions. The first was to commence with the judicial validation process, which is what we're here for today. Secondly, was to direct the city manager to hire Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Routh to act as our bond counsel for the judicial validation process. Brian Forbath from Stradling joins us today by phone if we have questions for him. I thank you both for joining us. The validation process is best described with the language provided by bond counsel that clarified that the California Constitution requires a two-thirds approval from the electorate to issue new debt. However, there's an exception under certain circumstances to finance or refinance certain debts. In this scenario, the city can do so without a vote of the public, but it does require a judicial determination to be made, specifically a formal judgment declaring that the city's obligation to CalPERS is an obligation imposed by law and therefore may be refunded. So today we're going to talk about that process in a little more depth, talk about the timeline involved, as well as a handful of documents associated with this action. Wanted to make a couple of comments before we got into the nitty-gritty. First off, we'll talk about pension obligation bonds and what those are. Specifically, these are bonds that are issued where the proceeds from these debt instruments can only be used to pay for those obligations, the pension obligations. They cannot be used for other uses. Secondly, this action does not directly authorize the issuance of bonds. This simply is an authorization and direction of the City Council to take the next step to move into the validation process. This is basically asking the City Council for the authority to present to the San Diego Superior Court our case for why we need pension obligation bonds. And if they grant that judgment, then we can have the discussion of how much, when, and how that is structured. This is simply the first step in seeking that authority. And just to hit my last point there, City Council will be presented with a decision at a later date whether or not to issue. So I've already described the validation process itself. This is largely an administrative process, typically takes between 90 and 120 days. The first action is included with today's report, and it is asking the City Council to approve the sale of POBs at a future date. The approval of certain legal documents in substantially final form, and again, we will return to the City Council for the final approval. The timeline is a multi-step process, first of which is asks that our bond counsel draft documents, which he has done and is included with this action. The first of which is a resolution stating the city's intent to issue POBs, a proposed trust document, a draft bond purchase agreement, and also included with this action is a good faith estimate. This is work done by our financial advisors on a typical but hypothetical scenario if we were issuing bonds right now. Next in the process is a presentation to the City Council, which is today, asking for the adoption of the resolution and authorizing the sales of POBs. Following that, if approved, a file validation action will be filed with the County Superior Court. From there, hopefully we will receive an order for publication of summons from the court. Next is a notice to publish in a local publication of general circulation. And that kicks off a minimum 10-day waiting period to file the petition. After that, the court clerk enters and schedules the hearing for default judgment, and then hopefully we conduct the hearing for default judgment. Following that is a 30-day appeal period, And then once we've cleared those hurdles, at that point, we then return to City Council for the approval of the preliminary official statement and authorization to sell POBs. Included in this report is the resolution stating the city's intent, the good faith estimate as I described, and the two documents that we're asking for approval for form. There's a lot of specifics that are not complete at this time, but the approval of form is what's required as part of the action. And with that, I conclude my presentation and am happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Clay. I appreciate that. Council members, any questions for Clay?
I have a question. Considering the time of year and the economy we're in, I would imagine the interest rate would be very, very favorable to do this at this time.
I think most people probably share that opinion. Unfortunately, there is some time involved with the validation process. Hopefully, by the time we complete that process, we're in a similar environment.
Right.
As far as investment goes.
No time like the present.
Any other questions or comments?
I've got a question.
Steve.
So in this process, the interest rate, or I'll call it the interest rate, is 7%. That's going to stay the same. But unlike a home mortgage, in which your principal balance never increases, in this case, because of the situation that we're in, we could actually see our principal balance go up, correct?
Not as a direct result of the bonds.
Not the bonds, but the COVID-19 situation and the shortage of PERS and having to pay more.
The unfunded liability is calculated by PERS annually. There is always a possibility that we could take action on Monday and the following year on Tuesday, the unfunded liability increases again. There is risk associated with this action. That is one of them. It is a risk that goes both ways.
The benefit is that the pension obligation funds, in a sense, would be paying down that balance at something lower than 7%, correct?
That is the goal, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Oh.
We're starting the process for pension obligation bonds, and in the report, it's saying not to exceed $205 million. And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't we projecting that our UAL was going to increase based off of the last staff report, Clay, that you just gave us? So, are we going to need to ask for more down the road to cover that shortfall because of the way our investment return, CalPERS investment returns are declining or are in negative? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I understand the concern you have with that, and I think that's well-founded. However, I suspect without the support of the actuarial valuation performed by CalPERS, I would suspect it would be difficult to obtain the authorization for a higher amount without that work to support it.
Clay, this is Brian Forbath from Stradling. I would just add that the authorization that the City Council is approving tonight is the authorization to issue bonds at up to $206 million in this initial series of bonds. Should the UAL be determined to increase at a future date, there's the validation action validates not only the issuance of these bonds but future bonds. So at a certain date in the future, if the council were to determine that you would like to issue additional pension obligation bonds to refinance additional UAL that comes online, the validation action will provide for that, and that would be at the council's direction at a future date. If that makes sense.
So my question would be, are we losing anything by doing this validation process now and maybe wait till June till we get that? Or as far as timeline and execution, or obviously we'll gain something if we start this timeline sooner because we're, lowering our payments. But
No, to answer your question, if when it comes to actually when the plan is to come back to the city council for approval of the offering documents for the bonds, and at that point in time the council decides that they want to issue more than $206 million, we could amend this resolution to do that at that point in time. However, we would need to have evidence from CalPERS of what the unfunded liability is. All that we can do is refund the unfunded liabilities as CalPERS has set forth, or an actuary has set forth for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more comment. So I think that the public should know other cities have gotten in trouble by using pension obligation bonds for things other than pensions. In our case, this money, can somebody describe how this money is restricted only towards pension obligations?
Yeah, so this is Brian Forbath again. So when the bonds are issued, essentially at closing, all of the proceeds from the bonds will be directly paid over to CalPERS immediately at closing. So the money won't ever go to the city. There won't be commingling with any city funds or any of that nature. It will go directly to CalPERS. And one other thing I wanted just to mention to make everybody's expectations in line. The San Diego courts are currently closed right now, at least through April 30th. So although we're authorizing this action today, we won't really be able to start the validation process until the courts reopen, which as of right now is May 1st, assuming we can get in as soon as possible. Obviously there's a backlog at the courts that's happening with it being delayed. So it may be the schedule said 90 to 120 days based on the situation that we are in. It might be a more prolonged schedule than what was anticipated, what was shown to you. I just wanted to make all the council aware of that.
Steve, that answer your question?
Yep, I'm good.
All right, anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you, Clay. All right. Angela, do we have any comments at this time?
No comments for this item.
All right. Well, gentlemen, it seems like a reasonable thing to do right now. We've talked about this for a long time, and of course we get one more bite at the apple when this comes back to council. But it seems to me like it's a good time to proceed and see where we go with this. Anybody have any thoughts? I'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the sale of pension obligation bonds from CalPERS unfunded accrued liability in an amount not to exceed $205 million. Authorizes Stradling to file and manage the validation proceedings and to adopt the next resolution in order.
Second.
All right, motion is moved and seconded. Let's vote. My vote is yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote, please.
My vote is yes.
Councilmember Goebel.
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick.
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Bob?
I vote yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, thank you very much. All right. We are moving quickly through the process now. The last administrative report, item 13, is a report on COVID-19, and I'll ask staff to introduce this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This staff presentation is a comprehensive agenda report about the city's response to date for COVID-19, and we'll be presenting some recommendations of how we believe the city should continue to respond to this pandemic. If we go to the next slide. There are the agenda report and our presentation will cover 6 sections, and we're going to briefly cover these so we can spend the majority of our time focused on the proposals that are in the report. So at this time, I'm going to ask our fire chief, Chief Steve Swaney, to come up. He is really our resident expert on COVID-19. He is leading the men and women that are really out in the front line, and he's going to give a status report of what's going on at the county level, the city level, and also some other local perspectives.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Mr. Mitchell asked me to give you a brief update on the goings-on about COVID-19 throughout the county. As we all know, this is a public health emergency, and San Diego County Department of Health and Human Services is taking the lead on the mitigation efforts in dealing with this. San Diego County Office of Emergency Services has its Emergency Operations Center staffed and operational at this time, and they're using web EOC to communicate with all the players, all the cities and the districts and the hospitals and the people that put in for requests through there. They're being supported by the county's all-hazard incident management team and making sure that the logistics needs are being met of the community, and they're reaching out to law enforcement, fire, the hospitals, the senior living facilities, and also dealing with the homeless issues. So it's an all-encompassing effort to make sure that no one's left behind in getting that information out and getting the much-needed supplies out in form of personal protective equipment to those entities. As of today, there was 1,930 confirmed cases of COVID in the county. That's up 83 since yesterday. They actually came out with a number today that's an estimate of 681 people have recovered from COVID. So that's good news. People are starting to recover that initially came up with it when we started this journey 30 days ago. We do have an increase in deaths in the county by 53. And I don't have any details as far as the age factor or if they had any other underlying medical conditions. Harlan Fire and Rescue, through its Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, has the city's Emergency Operations Center activated at Level 3, and we're monitoring that virtually, just like everybody else is these days. So we're keeping up to date on all the different information that's coming out there, and we assure everybody that we're endeavoring to persevere to keep current on this fast-changing environment and making sure that we're implementing best practices. In El Cajon, the county says that there's 111 cases. This is not necessarily accurate because it's a count done by zip codes and not actually the city boundaries. So our numbers are high in El Cajon because we have 3 different zip codes, and the fact that we have some senior centers or senior living facilities, skilled nursing facilities that have some high outbreak numbers in them. So that's some of the reasons that our numbers are high. The public health orders that are still in place is that the county and the state of California have issued a stay-at-home order. If you must go out, maintain social distancing and cover your face with a cloth mask. They just issued some new orders on, I believe April 8th or April 9th, extending this out to April 30th. And they've changed some of the rules. So non-essential businesses should remain closed. No gathering of individuals should occur of any kind. Gatherings of members of the same household are allowed. So if you're out in public and you're from the same household, then you can stay together, but that's it. Physical and social distancing of 6 feet should be practiced. Parks may remain open as long as there's no social gathering that's taking place within those parks, and but the parking lot should remain closed to prevent people from gathering in the parks or in their vehicles. Essential businesses that remain open shall enact social distancing measures and increase sanitation standards and provide masks to their employees. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention maintain that the most effective ways to slow the spread of COVID-19 is to frequently wash your hands, do not touch your face, clean frequently touched surfaces, and stay at home unless you need to go out for essential services. So that is still the stance as of now. The county does not have any widespread testing available or any real recommendation of when that will take place. They're still developing different types of tests, whether it's serology or whether it's the nasal swab, and looking at the accuracy of that, and then what does that mean once they get widespread testing out there for people. I would encourage people, if they need information, to either go to the city's website on the big banner on the front page that'll direct you to the San Diego COVID website, or go right directly to the San Diego COVID website to get accurate, real-time information on what's available to them. One of the things I'd like to do is to put some of this in perspective right now. We have the flu going through right now is kind of on the downhill side. We've got strep throat out there, and we have a lot of fear that's being perpetuated by when someone starts having a fever, a little bit of a sore throat, and with all the COVID numbers that are out there. So to kind of put things in perspective is that these numbers that come from the county is that they're cumulative, and that they don't necessarily reflect the number of active cases that are going on at the time. And so as these numbers keep ticking up, it's not, people are getting better on the backside of that as well. So I just want to reiterate that to people. There's over 20,500 flu cases right now in San Diego County, and there's been over 100 deaths just from the flu. So I just don't want people the anxiety level to be out there. If they get a little bit of fever, don't start feeling good. Be aware of the symptoms, and if you start having more severe symptoms, such as shortness of breath, contact your healthcare provider, and they will make recommendations for you. So with that completes my report, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Chief, thanks very much for that report. Council members, any questions for the chief?
No.
I think it's a great report.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Next, I'd like to invite up Graham Mitchell.
So, Mr. Mayor, I heard that I was difficult to hear from where I was sitting, so I'll just speak from the podium if that's okay with you.
That's great.
So I should go to the next slide. So last month, it's important to note that the U.S. Congress and the President adopted a Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or referred to as CARES. And that's really the way that there's a stimulus package that's going to affect a lot of individuals in our community, but also include some money that will be coming to the city of El Cajon. It'll be coming to the city in the form of an augmentation of our CDBG money, our Community Development Block money. And that money will also have a lot of the same parameters and regulations and rules that our current CDBG money has. And in fact, we would be required, if we were to spend this money on anything different than we're currently spending it on, we'll have to actually go back and amend the city's 2019-2020 CDBG action plan. So we will plan on doing that based on or depending on the type of feedback we get from the City Council at today's agenda item. So I just wanted the Council to be aware that there's about $800,000 of this augmented money that will come to us specifically to help individuals, typically of low-income households. Go to the next slide. So I just wanted to point out a couple things that we've been doing since the announcement of the pandemic. We have upgraded our website. If you go to, and Chief Swaney mentioned this, but if you go to the front of our website, there's a red banner. Click on that. It has a lot of resources. We've tried not to reinvent the wheel. We are not the experts. We don't have health professionals that work for us except for our fire department. So we rely on county health department and CDC data. And so we have a lot of those resources all culled together in one location. So we encourage people to go there. It has the latest and the greatest, and avoid any rumors by going there. The other thing that we've done is we've kept City Hall open. Even though we're not open to the public at all of our levels within City Hall, we're currently helping customers in the lobby. We help a lot of our customers through the internet, on phone. As I mentioned earlier in this evening's meeting, we can submit contractors and homeowners can submit plans through our PACO program, and so we're still reviewing plans, providing all the services that we have been, because we consider ourselves an essential service. We also have installed 9 hand washing stations provided by the County of San Diego throughout the city. We've placed those in places that are of high impact or high trafficked areas. We've tried to buoy people's well-being through our recreation squad. And if we can go to the next slide, we've really been trying to engage our community. So the squad drives around in a really brightly colored orange van. We recently did a hopscotch contest where we put, how many hopscotch? 108 hopscotches in front of people's homes where they could go out and, with appropriate physical distancing, do some hopscotching. We have a plethora of videos on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So you can see one individual showing how to play frisbee tic-tac-toe. And then we also did an art class of how to do watercolor, some basic watercolor. So there's a lot of different activities, so no one can say they're bored and have nothing to do. Just go to YouTube and search for City of El Cajon Recreation Department. You'll get a lot of different videos. Next slide. We've taken a lot of the county videos that are in a lot of different languages. However, one of the languages that they were not in is Arabic. And so using some local talent, we actually did some Arabic voiceover, and the counties use that video voiceover. So we've been able to add Arabic video to the other videos, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and other languages on the county website. So we've been able to provide our services there. We've held a virtual town hall meeting hosting our mayor. We've had, this will be our third council meeting that we've held virtually. We're having a planning commission meeting next Tuesday. We'll be holding that virtually. We have offered to be a place where the county can do drive-through testing when that comes available. And then we've also, and I'm going to focus on this a little bit more for the rest of my presentation, we've created within our city organization 3 response teams or hot teams. One is focusing on impacts that our residents are experiencing. We're also focusing on impacts that our business community is experiencing, and then a team that's focused on our homeless community. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. If we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to just very, very lightly touch on some impacts to the city. Our finance director covered a lot of that, but we know that there's going to be some general fund impacts because of COVID-19 with our businesses shut down. We know it'll impact sales tax revenue. Our finance director talked about deferred sales tax payments. We think that there will be an impact there. I read one study that could be as much as $1 million. We'll eventually get that money, but that is a lot of money for the city of El Cajon. We think it'll also have a long-term impact on property tax. We think there's going to be vacancy rates in our commercial corridors, potentially in our residential neighborhoods, and so that's going to have an impact on property tax. And of course, our transient occupancy tax, we're noticing a decline in that as well. As our finance director also talked about, we'll be seeing some impacts to our pension costs. So we're anticipating those costs. Mr. McClellan encouraged staff to sharpen the pencil. I'll let you know, council, what we've done so far. We haven't done anything drastic. We haven't had authorization to do that, but we have slowed down any hiring process. We've actually not hired anybody unless they're in the public safety. We've actually had to let go some of our temporary part-time staff, and we've put them on leave. We've cut back a lot of our hourly staff hours in anticipation of some budget hardships to come. And as we prepare the budget, we're well into it, but as we continue to prepare, you should expect some additional cuts to our budget. Go to the next slide. So earlier I talked about some of the things that we're doing internally, and part of that is creating these response teams, and we've been looking at what do we think are some of the short-term and long-term impacts that we're going to have to our business community, to our neighborhoods, to our residences. We really believe that with our non-essential businesses closed, there is going to be a short-term impact, of course, but potentially a long-term impact. And we really believe that our small businesses, the mom-and-pop businesses, especially the non-essential ones, will struggle if even come back at all. We also worry about the viability of Parkway Plaza. We don't know. We already know that there's some structural shifts occurring in the marketplace before this occurred. We know that a lot of big box stores are closing down and consolidating. We think that this will probably expedite some of those movements in the market. I think the longer we stay in the current state that we're in, the more structural changes that we'll see. I think that our city's prepared to deal with long-term structural changes, but if those all happen in one fiscal year, that makes it a little bit more challenging from a land use perspective. So these are some things that we're thinking about a lot over the last few weeks. We know that a lot of our residents are either experiencing unemployment or underemployment. They're not getting the hours that they used to have, and so that's going to have an impact on the ability to generate sales, consumer confidence, and potentially impact on homelessness, and also the ability to pay rent and to pay mortgages. We also worry about just the well-being of our children. And we have amazing schools and school districts that represent our kids, but we know, I can speak from firsthand experience, my kids don't get as good of an education from me and my wife as they do from their teachers, and they miss school, and I think that their quality of education will be declining, and I think that we'll be seeing that across the state of California and across the world over this next semester. So it's a concern that we have, and we've been thinking about what's the city's responsibility in that. We've been doing a lot of coordinating with our school districts, and we plan on continuing to do that. Next slide. So let me talk about these response teams really quickly. We've asked each of the response teams, the resident response team, the business response team, and the homeless response team, to identify the top 3 challenges that they see in these different groups, and then to generate some recommendations. And so I'm going to just go over the challenges, highlight the recommendations, then I'll dive into the recommendations a little bit more deeper when we look at the budget. So for the resident response team, the 3 big challenges are income of our residents being affected by unemployment, the physical and mental wellness of our residents, and also access to food and to housing. We've come up with 6 proposals that we'd like to present. We'd like to recommend that we consider not charging late fees on our utility bills through the end of 2020, so through all the way through December. We currently aren't charging late fees right now, and we planned on doing that during this billing transition, but we would actually recommend extending that out through the rest of the year. We'd also recommend delaying bills in the months, the remainder months of April and May, to not be sent out, but we would add those bills to future months, and it would expect those funds to be paid. But that would give our residents a bit of a break during this period of underemployment and until the stimulus checks arrive. We'd also recommend that we create a utility assistance program that could help with any utilities. And the goal of that is to help really put money into people's hands so they can pay rent and pay for food. It's just a way to defray some of the costs that they have. We would recommend that we continue to provide free online recreation classes. I know there's some places that are doing this in the private sector. There's other opportunities to generate money. We don't think this is a time to look for money generation opportunities, but to push for more free online classes, and more than just the videos we've been doing now, but more structured classes. We think that there's some opportunities to create some food delivery for our seniors. We know there's some private sector or some nonprofit programs out there that we think that we should be supporting. We worry about food security in our community. We know that there are about 6 food distributions that occur at different locations any given time. We'd like to take a more active role in promoting those throughout the community and through our website. And then after COVID-19 pandemic is over and we return to some semblance of normalcy, we know that disposable income will be a bit of a challenge, so we'd like to actually figure out a way to offer some discounts to recreation programs and, if even possible, to other youth sports leagues. It's an area that we're exploring right now. We'll go to the next slide. The business response team identified actually 4 challenges. One is lost revenue that businesses are experiencing because of the shutdown. Business closures once the distancing limits are lifted. The safety of employees. And also layoffs. It's going to be a structural change with a lot of businesses, and it's hard to lay off employees. So we think those are 4 areas of challenges that we see. We don't have as many resources to help businesses because we can't use CARES funds for those, but we thought of 3 different recommendations. One, we think that we can become this deposit of business resources. There's a lot of different information coming from the state, from the federal government, from nonprofits. We think that we could be a place where all that information can be provided on a website, We'd like to work with our local chambers of commerce, and then we'd also like to actually go out with our teams and go out and directly contact businesses one by one, and so they know that we're here for them and do a lot of hands-on approach with that. We'd also like to the council to consider waiving business or late business license fees or any late fees relating to business licenses, and then we would also apply the no late fees for sewer to businesses as well. And then lastly, we'd like to soften regulations relating to banners and to temporary uses. We know that as businesses are currently operating in this environment where restaurants only have takeout, we think that having a banner would be appropriate at this time. And we know as businesses get back into going, we probably need to have some relaxed regulations about them trying to get going. So we'd like to encourage, we'd propose that we actually soften our regulations in there temporarily. Lastly, we have a homeless response team. We identified the 3 big challenges of shelter, hygiene, and frankly, the risk of additional homelessness in our community. So we have 3 programs that we want to talk about. One is we'd like to allocate some funding from the CARES money for additional shelter space. That could be in the form of secured shelters. It could be in the form of hotel vouchers or motel vouchers. And it could also include a safe parking program temporarily during this period of time. We also know that the state of California has put a lot of resources into homeless services. Those resources are being managed by the San Diego Regional Task Force on Homelessness. We have no control over those funds. We know a lot of those resources are being allocated to areas outside of the city of El Cajon, and we know that we have a homeless community that would like to access those. So we think there's some value in us being a conduit to get some of our population that would like to access those services to those services through transportation. In order to address our fear of people becoming homeless, we'd like to allocate or recommend allocating money to either a rapid rehousing program and a combination of some rental assistance before people do become homeless. We would recommend working with a nonprofit to help administer those funds to keep people into their homes. We'll go to the next slide. In addition to the staff's recommendations, we presented a bunch of them. Council members have also approached staff with some ideas, and I'd like to present those at this time. And after I'm done maybe with this slide, if council members want to chime in and talk about some of, maybe elaborate a little bit more of what I was talking about. The mayor has expressed some concerns about food security in our community. We have food programs for school-age children. We have food programs for our seniors, but there's a big gap in the middle. And so we thought that the city helping some existing programs in our community, help to provide more food for our community would be a worthwhile thing. And we would recommend supporting some of the organizations that are already doing this fantastic work and continue to ensure that they have funding to help our residents. Council members Goebel and Kendrick expressed some concern about rent increases and also the impact that landlords are going to have during this period of time, especially until the stimulus checks arrive. And so they have presented a resolution that would strongly discourage landlords from increasing rent during this period of time from April until May, but also encourage tenants to be proactive in reaching out to landlords and expressing their financial struggles and challenges so landlords can prepare for make some contingency plans so they can also ensure that their bills are paid, that their mortgages are paid. Lastly, Councilmember Ortiz has contacted us about his work that he's been doing with the East County Chamber of Commerce. There's currently not a request for funding or specifically a city action at this time, but he's worked with them to get a survey out that will ask a lot of our businesses what their status is, how are they doing, do they plan on reopening, and it'd be, I think, prudent for this council to have a look at that data once it's available. And so I would actually recommend that we bring that as a separate agenda item back or cobbled together with other items in the future as that data is available. At this time, council members, do you have any additional comments about the three council-directed proposals?
Yes. I would like to know what we're doing about code compliance. We've loosened that up a little bit to where we aren't threatening people and fining them, and maybe just asking for their cooperation in code compliance issues, unless it's a safety issue where they need to address it immediately, and maybe we could help them find a solution for those issues.
So certainly, Mr. McClellan, that's something that we'd look for some council direction on. I think I said this earlier. Just from a policy perspective, you should be aware that we are getting more code enforcement complaints now than we have received typically. And so we do need a balance being responsive to those that are making the complaints with the needs of those that are receiving the complaints. I think we can, and I think staff has already done this. I think we do this already, but I think we can even do it more, take not a heavy-handed approach. I think that's not our goal. The goal is to look for solutions and not for fines. So if the council's okay with that approach, we'll continue to do that.
Council, we just send them a letter and ask them to do what they can to comply with the code compliance. And when the people do call in, you might tell them we're overwhelmed with everybody staying home with a lot of these complaints, and we'll put it on the list and we'll get to it in the order that we receive, just like you do when you call in and they say, well, you won't lose your place in line, but we'll address it as we have time to address that item, so that it will relax it a little bit and they understand why.
Council, I've been happy with the way the city's been handling it. I'm sure you have, like I have, had many conversations with the city manager talking about all these various issues of who should stay open and who should not be open and what people are doing. I'm comfortable with keeping it the way it is and letting it stay the course, but I don't know how you feel. Thoughts on this?
I'll weigh in. I think city staff does an excellent job in weighing what's fair, because it's one thing for somebody to file a code compliance complaint. It's another thing for a business that's trying to do their very best to survive.
Yeah, I would have to agree with the mayor and Councilman Goebel. I think the city's doing a good job having that balance in the approach during these really crazy times. So I think you keep moving forward, Graham, with code compliance and the way that you have been.
Just as a reminder, our first warning actually is a letter. It's not even a citation. It really is a letter. We'll continue that process, and I think we just need to be sensitive to the circumstances.
Anybody else need the way on this? Gary?
Yes. I really like the idea of easing up on the regulations regarding the banners, because I think it's important that the restaurants that are still open for takeout can put up their banners that open for takeout. That's a really big deal. It could make the difference between a business surviving and not surviving. And I've read that there are some restaurants in the San Diego County, the way they're surviving is they're like grocery stores now, because they're going to have some supplies coming in from their suppliers, and maybe they need to sell, avocados and meats and other things that are kind of hard to get in the regular grocery stores, and they're smaller, so they'd be less crowded. So if our ordinance allows it, maybe they can put up a banner that says "Now selling groceries." I think it's important we do what we can to help the people stay in business.
Okay. Well, Graham, so you've heard from everybody.
Yeah.
I think that overall feeling is that you're doing a good job. We like the way things are going. We'd like to keep abreast of things on a pretty quick basis. If if you start seeing changes in the circumstances. But and I'm sure the council will quickly weigh in if we see something happening that we feel is untoward. But for right now, it seems like I like your plan. I like the way you've approached it. I like the way the police and the fire department are approaching things, and the recreation department. And so,
okay,
keep moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and council members Goebel and Kendrick and Ortiz, would you like to weigh in on your suggestions at this time?
I'll weigh in on the resolution that Councilman Kendrick and I are sponsoring. Although most landlords are probably fighting tenants being able to pay rent and all, I have seen instances where landlords have increased rent, perhaps to make up for those that might be falling under, which is not a good strategy at all. So it's not an ordinance, it's not an urgency ordinance, just a statement of belief through a resolution that we ask landlords not to raise rent for the next 2 months while residents are getting their stimulus and support checks. But by the same time, we don't want landlords going out of business and being foreclosed on. That just reduces the housing supply in El Cajon. So we are urging tenants who might feel the stress of making a payment to contact their landlord before the rent comes due, before there's a problem. So our resolution is a statement of belief on both sides. Landlords help out the tenants, and tenants communicate with your landlord.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. I've been a landlord for about 40 years, and the landlords are in the rental business, not in the vacancy business. So I actually think it's a really bad idea to raise rent right now. It's not good business sense. So I'm trying to discourage landlords from doing that. And again, also, a lot of landlords are just mom and pop operations. It's really helpful if the tenants let the landlords know as soon as possible that if they can't pay all the rent or can't pay any other rent. It's really to everybody's benefit to work together on this, landlords and tenants.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let me sum up. Let me conclude with.
Can I say something real quick?
Before
Graham,
you went, finish, Graham. I wanted to.
Oh yeah, and it looks like Mr. Ortiz would like to speak too. Mayor.
Yeah, Phil, please go ahead.
Thanks. We created this survey to go out to all of the East County Chamber members, which are most of them are small businesses, and we've actually joined forces with other East County chambers as well to get more the survey out into more business owners' email boxes. It went out today, so if you're a business owner and you're listening, please go to our East County Chamber website and fill it out just to get a pulse on how we're doing. On top of that, I know that there's another business organization, the Lincoln Club, is working with a couple of county supervisors to come up with a committee to when the economy opens up, what does that look like? So we're encouraging feedback through reaching out to the businesses to show solidarity and support, to say, hey, let's get some feedback to our policymakers when we do open up the economy. What does that look like? So if there is feedback in that respect too, what does that look like? So we've had a huge response in the survey already. It went out today, and I think we had over 200 responses in an hour or so. So I haven't looked at the data, but I'll be bringing that back shortly.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Are you done? All right, so hard here. Graham, the one thing I wanted to ask you about, for the food insecurity issue, and the reason I brought that up was I remember when I was a college kid and I was waiting tables. If I went probably 3 days without going to work, I'd run out of money. And I think that it's pretty common for younger people to be living from paycheck to paycheck, or even tip night to tip night if they're in that kind of an industry. And I would just worry about them having one good meal a day. I think that they're not going to lose their apartments. They're not going to probably have their cars repossessed, but there may not be enough money to buy a decent meal. So that's what we had talked about, and you've got some ideas about that. Do you have any concept of how much that might cost, on a per week basis to provide that kind of assistance?
So we had actually a committee that looked at a lot of different options, and they ranged from restaurant vouchers, so that would help keep restaurants in business and also provide a meal. But there's an administrative. It's not easy to administer a program like that. Second is it won't go far. So if you are allocating $100,000 and it's costing $7.50 a meal, that goes pretty quickly. And so we also looked at us just contracting with someone to do meals on their own. We have some folks in town that have that capacity. I think at the end of the day, we know that organizations like the Salvation Army and the Food Bank are able to take a few dollars and spread those dollars out much further than we probably could as a government agency. And so in our minds, it probably made sense to utilize the existing infrastructure that exists, or the current infrastructure that exists, allocate money to them and ensure that that money is being used in El Cajon to augment or to expand what they're currently doing in El Cajon.
And a good example of that is East County Transitional Living Center. I think they've shaved their cost of the 500,000 meals they serve every year to about 17 cents a meal. Now, that's because they do it in such volume, and they have a whole list of partners that donate to their food drive every day. But the concept's still the same. There's probably no way that we could provide a meal for less than $10 a meal, whereas an organization like you're talking about may be able to provide it for $2 or $3 per meal. So
yeah,
I agree with that. As long as it doesn't get lost into the black hole of need that's there for people that are chronically homeless. And it's not that I don't want to help those people. We're helping those people in many, many ways. But I want to specifically acknowledge the working poor right now, the people that normally would not access any kind of program, but maybe for the 6 weeks or 12 weeks or 15 weeks that are left in this, they have need for one meal a day. And so do you think there's a way we could do that? We could make sure that those people aren't lost in the shuffle?
We think so, and we think that's the majority of individuals that are currently accessing the existing food programs in our community. After talking with them, we would not recommend allocating all the funding that we're going to propose to one organization. We'd actually recommend spreading it out to several organizations. And I think we should go as far to have a contract with some expectations of what we want that money to be used for. And so there's probably not time to revisit this meeting after meeting after meeting, and because it would be difficult for any of these organizations to ensure that the folks that are receiving this food would be CDBG eligible. I'm actually recommending that this pot of money come out of the general fund. Yeah. It'll just make it easier to do. If the council, as part of your feedback tonight or direction, you could give me direction just to contract with agencies and report back to you rather than bring back a contract with these different agencies. My fear is we could spend a lot of time doing typical government bureaucracy and not getting money out there.
Well, I don't know about the rest of the council. My feeling is I would like to direct you just to do it, get it done. The council may want to put some parameters on that, Is that something we could decide tonight?
I think so. And when I'm going to get to my recommendations right now, I think we can go through one by one, and that's where you can give me some specific feedback of you like it, you don't like it, how do you want us to administer that, what are some parameters for that. I think that's the time to do that.
All right, well, why don't we go through those recommendations, and then the council can weigh in on each one.
Okay. If we can go to the next slide. So about 6 of the proposals or suggestions that we've made really have nominal fiscal impact. Sewer billing delay, not a big impact. Free online rec programming, not a big impact. We think promoting our food opportunities is just a matter of ensuring that the data is out there. Our business outreach effort using existing staff, softening code enforcement on banners. I'd like to point out we've not done any code enforcement on banners since the outbreak has occurred. And then transportation services for homeless. We don't think that's expensive. We don't know how much that is, so it's hard for us to really say. But these are sort of all really low-hanging, cheap opportunities. I shouldn't say cheap, but inexpensive things that we as a city can do to benefit our community, and we think it can have some significant impacts. If we go to the next slide, this is where the more money is. We've identified 8 different programs, and we've broken that up into whether it would be general funded, whether it would be funded through CARES, federal money, or some other source. We think that if we allocated $300,000 for utility assistance and $200,000 for rapid rehousing rental assistance, this really gets to those that are on the bubble of potentially becoming homeless. And I think for staff, that's a big priority, and I think that's where the majority of your CARES funds should probably go to, with some general fund money towards the Food to Seniors program. We would then also recommend that $250,000 be allocated for additional homeless shelter, and that would be split up amongst various organizations to really meet our ultimate need. We would not recommend putting the money all in one item. For example, we would only recommend probably a few motel vouchers. We'd probably recommend some money for the parking lot, and we'd contract with an existing homeless shelter provider for some guaranteed spaces. The other recommended programs, like the discounted rec program, Frank Carson's currently working on some funding for that into the future. We have time to work on that. Waiving business license late fees and sewer late fees. We don't really know what that fiscal impact will be. Most businesses pay their business license already, so there's not a lot of new coming in. So that's probably nominal, but a little bit unknown. But we're really looking for council recommendations on these big items and also those other less expensive items as well. We can go back and forth from that list. And then just to conclude, we're looking for feedback on these. We would recommend the implementation of these programs, and the recommendation, we would recommend that the council consider the resolution presented by council members Goebel and Kendrick. So with that, staff's here to take any feedback and direction.
I have a question. Are we able to, with the utility assistance, the rapid rehousing rental assistance, are we able to put conditions on this to make sure that the money that we're handing out is going to be directly given to the residents that are in need? If we end up contracting with a nonprofit to facilitate it, I don't want it to go to admin costs. I want it to go to as much money as possible to go directly to our residents that are on the bubble and losing their housing.
That's a good question. As you recall, when we do our homeless programming, we allocate almost 100% of it. And I can't say 100%, but as much of it as we can to actual programs. If you look at other programs administered by the state or through the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, that's not the case. A lot of it goes for admin. We would expect that some of this money does have to cover some admin costs. There's going to be some costs to administer these programs. But one of the things that we'll be doing as we have a conversation with these organizations is to get a real good comfort that they understand that we expect at least 90% of this money to go to the public, with very little going towards overhead. And we do think that 10% is probably an accurate amount of money that is justifiable to overhead. In fact, a lot of federal contracting is between 12 to 20%. We'd like to push organizations to 10%.
Personally, I think that's reasonable. Phil?
Is there any way to direct any of this money to the Alcone Transitional Living Center because of the fact that they aren't able to go out and work in the community right now, and they're pretty well locked down, so they have no income coming in, basically. They still have expenses with their utilities and everything, and their meal costs are practically nil. But if we could give them a portion of this funding, it would really help them get through this period that they really need assistance. And also the Salvation Army. They got a really good food bank and use a lot of volunteers. The labor costs are practically nil, and for both of these organizations. So it would be my direction to try and give some of this money to both of those organizations, because I know that they're really watch their pennies very closely. So that would be my recommendation.
Certainly. So first of all, because this is CDBG money, we do have to go through HUD regulations. So we just can't right now decide we want money for here, here, and here. But we can clearly reach out to those that are currently working with us. ECTLC has been a long-term partner. We would expect them to continue to be a partner with us on this. And we certainly can allocate money for them for shelter. I'd like to point out that they have a contract with us to do trash pickup throughout the city. That's an essential service. So they still are operating under that contract right now. So we're grateful for that. But that's clearly one of our recommended partner organizations. Depending on the feedback we get from the city council this afternoon, they'll be one of the entities we call.
One of their big sources of income is the Padre games and things like that, and going out in the community and doing other things, and they just can't do that right now. So I would really like to see them get a good stipend.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to help them with that specifically, but we could rent shelter space from them, which would be an eligible allocation of these funds.
Hey, Graham, I have no problem with them getting part of this. I think they've shown to be good partners. I just want to say one thing is that we have a tendency sometimes in government to have multiple goals. And sometimes you get stuck on one of those goals and then the whole operation gets delayed by 6 weeks or 6 months. I don't think we have time for that.
Well, we are going to be delayed by 4 weeks because in order to amend the FY 1920 CDBG action plan, we're required to do public noticing, and those federal regulations won't allow us to get to the next meeting. So what we would recommend is if whatever feedback's given today, we could have everything ready to go for a public hearing the first meeting of May, and we could issue contracts the day after. That'd be our goal.
We could do the general fund food programs.
We can do the general fund stuff immediately, but the HUD or the CARES related programs, that will have to wait about a month before this money gets on the street.
All right. Gentlemen, more comments?
Yeah, I've got a question. Two questions. Is this CARES Act money use it or lose it?
Yes. Okay. And it can only really be related to COVID-19 related impacts. So if we were to bank it and use it for a capital improvement, we would not be able to use that. And so we won't be getting a check. We'll actually be expending and then submitting reimbursement. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Are we able to allocate some of the money to people who applied for CDBG money and either didn't get any or increase what they got?
If they fit within the parameters of what we've already talked about. So, for example, there was one organization that didn't receive any funding. They had applied for the first time. We don't think that would be eligible because there's not a direct COVID-19 related issue with that.
what's the impact, for instance, if you increase the allotment to the Meals on Wheels?
Yes, that would be a possibility.
Does that set a precedent that next year, because they got extra, it creates a problem next year?
I don't know if it would set an expectation, just because this is one-time money and this won't be coming back again next year.
Okay, my final question is, do you have a sense of how many homeless people might be getting $1,200 stimulus check?
What's that?
Do you have a sense of how many homeless people, transients or people who are homeless, might be getting $1,200 stimulus checks?
Well, if I know if they've submitted taxes, yes, they'll be receiving it. I don't know what percentage of our homeless population has. And I know there's a way for individuals that have not applied for or paid taxes or filed a tax return to register. What percentage, I don't know. So the answer is no, I don't know, but I know there is a way to do that.
Okay, I'll save the rest of my comments for the council when we decide on how we allocate this money.
I have a question. When Bill speaks in this microphone, it's not near as clear as it is on Graham's microphone. Maybe we could get a new microphone for Bill, because it sounds real garbled the way I'm hearing it.
We think this mic at the podium just picks up better, so I'll ask the mayor to speak up.
Well, Council, any more comments on this?
I do. This is Gary. A couple comments. First of all, because East County Transitional Living Center is so incredibly efficient, I'd like to see them a major player in this as much as possible. And the second is, I've known many of the staff members for 20 years. I have complete confidence that they'll make the right decision. So I'd like to give the city manager as much responsibility as possible for allocating this money. I don't want to have us haggling over it and delaying things. I'd rather see him just make the decision, and it's quick and cuts out all the red tape, the bureaucracy. And that's it.
Okay.
I agree with Gary. The only one concern I have is on the additional shelter $250,000. I would like the city staff to be mindful. We don't necessarily want to create programs that become a magnet for people outside the city.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So I think you're smart enough to know we don't want to become a magnet.
Right. I trust Graham to make that decision. I think he's very well aware of that issue.
Okay. So is council okay with the recommendations that we presented thus far with the parameters that you've given?
This is Gary. I am.
Yeah, I am, with the caveat that we just expressed.
All right.
Yeah, I'm happy with the plan. Thank you, Graham, and all the staff that put in the extra time to make sure we're addressing our citizens' needs at this time. I think it's a huge boost, and I think it's going to go a long way.
I am, with the Transitional Living Center and the Salvation Army getting a good stipend, because they do an excellent job at very minimal cost.
So with that, I would recommend that the council adopt the resolution that's before you this evening, and I don't think you need to take a vote on the feedback, because we have to bring most of that back anyway. And there's a public comment, by the way, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, great. Before we get to the public comment, you don't need a vote on this?
Well, I'd recommend you take public comment first, and then we can come back to the vote part.
Let's do the public comment, please.
This comment is from Mohammed Tuama in reference to the high COVID-19 infection numbers in the city of El Cajon. Can the city provide the residents with some detail about the local outbreaks and clusters? or at least why the numbers are increasing.
Can you repeat that again?
In reference to the high COVID-19 infection numbers in the city of El Cajon, can the city provide the residents with some detail about the local outbreaks and clusters, or at least why the numbers are increasing?
I think I'll ask our fire chief to answer that question. Grant, would you like to take that?
Let me take a quick stab at that. First of all, we do have high numbers, but there's a couple things going on. We currently have 113 cases, or we have had at least since the commencement 113 cases in the city. We know that over 50 of those cases are at one convalescent home. So about almost half of the cases are at one location. We also know that 12 of them are at a convalescent home or a location that is outside the city limits. So that's almost 10% that are currently outside of the city limits, and we think that the number is actually higher because we continue to find additional clusters as they get reported to us outside the city limits. The county health department is the agency that has the ability to disseminate the specific information that Mr. Twom has requested. It's not our information to disseminate. We wish we could do that. We do know that we are setting up with the county a town hall specifically for our Arabic-speaking community, and those would be really good questions specifically for county health officials that will be on that town hall.
I think that's a good answer to the question. Thanks, Graham. Are there any more questions?
No more comments, sir.
Okay, Graham, back to you.
So what we'd recommend is that the council consider for a vote the adoption of the resolution that's included with the agenda report, and then I think we've received enough feedback to actually implement what you've asked us to do.
Sounds good. Council, how do you feel about that?
I'd move that we adopt the recommendation.
Graham, do you want to vote on this?
Second.
You want to vote on this?
It doesn't hurt to vote, but you do need to vote specifically on the resolution, for sure.
Okay.
Well, let's start with the resolution then. Steve, this is your resolution. Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'll move we adopt the resolution.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Steve.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Perfect. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Let's vote. I vote yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote?
I vote yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
That's great. Thank you. All right, and then the second part of that for the financial assistance, I don't think he needs a vote on this. He just needs direction from the council. I think that it's going in the right direction. Council, are you comfortable with the direction that it's going? It will come back to us at the beginning of next month to vote on it.
Yes.
I'm seeing shaking heads, Graham. Let's do this as fast as we can.
Okay, let's do it.
This is Gary. Yes.
Gary, go ahead. Oh, he said yes? Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. That's, I'm really proud of the city. That's the right thing to do. All right, we're at commissioner reports. There are no commissioner reports on today's agenda. My activities are as reported. We're at legislative reports now. Councilmember Kendrick, how are your activities? Gary, could you hear me?
Yeah, mine are as reported.
Okay, then, Deputy Mayor Phil Ortiz.
Uneventful and as reported.
Councilmember Goebel.
It's as I reported, and I just have a quick comment to say thank you for city staff who responded so quickly to a concern about a very large and dangerous public health condition over in the Greenfield area today. And the city staff, from law enforcement to public works to all sorts of people, really clean that up on less than 24 hours notice. So the people out in that area, I'm sure, appreciate the staff's work.
Thanks for that, Steve. Councilor McClellan?
Yes.
What activities report? Are they as reported?
As reported.
Perfect. Okay. There are no joint council member reports today, and there are no general information items for discussion. There are no first or second readings of ordinances, and there are no closed session items on today's agenda. So this brings us to adjournment of the regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council and El Cajon Housing Authority held this 14th day of April 2020. It is now adjourned until Tuesday, April 28th, 2020 at 3 o'clock p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and for going through this process with us. Council members, thank you for going the extra mile to get this done. And we will see you all at the end of April.